Have you ever seen those historical paintings of soldiers dressed in the most outrageously colorful and puffy outfits, looking like they just stepped out of a Renaissance fashion show? Well, those aren't just fantasy characters. Meet the Landsknechte, the German mercenaries, who were as famous for their wild fashion as they were for their ferocity in battle, for about a century, from the late 1400s to the late 1500s. These guys were the rock stars of the European battlefield, and their story is absolutely fascinating. So grab your feathered hat and your giant sword, because today we're diving into the world of the Landsknechte. So who were these flamboyant fighters? The term Landsknecht literally means servant of the land. They were created by Holy Roman Emperor Maximilian I around 1487. Maximilian needed a reliable, professional infantry force to counter the dominant Swiss pikemen of the era, who were considered the undisputed masters of the battlefield. His solution was to create his own version, but with a German twist. He recruited peasants, craftsmen, and even some down-on-their-luck nobles, offering them pay, adventure, and a chance to escape the rigid social structure of the time. These weren't just soldiers. They were entrepreneurs of violence, selling their skills to the highest bidder across Europe. What really set the Landsknechte apart, at least visually, was their clothing. We're talking about slashed and puffed sleeves and trousers, vibrant mismatched colors, and enormous feathered hats called berets. This style wasn't just for show, it was a statement. The story goes that after a brutal battle, their clothes would be torn to shreds. So they started patching them up with bits of fabric taken from enemy banners and tents. This act of defiance and survival evolved into a deliberate fashion trend. They began intentionally slashing their expensive clothes and pulling the colorful lining through the slits. It was a way of saying, "I've seen battle, I've survived, and I'm not afraid to show it." It was also a massive flex. In an age of strict clothing laws where your dress dictated your social class, Emperor Maximilian granted the Landsknecht an exemption. He famously said, "Their lives are so short and brutal. Let them have their pleasure in what they wear." This freedom made their extravagant dress a symbol of their unique and dangerous profession. But don't let the fancy clothes fool you. On the battlefield, the Landsknechte were a terrifying and effective force. Their primary formation was the pike square, a massive block of men armed with pikes that could be up to 18 feet long. This bristling wall of steel was almost impenetrable to cavalry charges, which had dominated medieval warfare. The front ranks were made up of the most experienced and best armored soldiers, called doppelt, or double-pay men. These veterans were paid twice the normal rate for taking on the most dangerous jobs. And what a dangerous job it was. Among the Doppelzöldner were the guys who wielded the legendary Zweihander, a massive two-handed sword. These swords could be as tall as a man and were used to chop the enemy's pikes down, creating gaps in their formations for the rest of the Landsknecht to exploit. Imagine the sheer strength and courage it took to run headfirst into a forest of enemy pikes, swinging a giant sword. It was a suicide mission, but the rewards and the glory were immense. In addition to pikes and Zweihanders, the Landsknechte also used halberds, which were a combination of a spear and an axe, perfect for close quarters fighting, and they were early adopters of firearms. Ranks of arquebuses, armed with early matchlock guns, would unleash volleys of fire to disrupt enemy formations before the main pike block crashed into them. This combination of pikes, swords, and guns was a revolutionary tactical system that changed the face of European warfare. One of the most unique aspects of Landsknechte life was their form of battlefield democracy. Each regiment or phone line was a community. They elected their own officers, except for the colonel, who was appointed by their employer. They had their own court, called the Ring, where they would settle disputes and mete out justice according to their own laws, known as the Law of the Pike. This wasn't a free-for-all, it was a structured society built on mutual respect and shared risk. The leader of the common soldiers, the provost, was a feared and respected figure responsible for maintaining discipline. If a Landsknecht broke the rules, he could face punishments ranging from running a gauntlet of his comrades to execution. This system fostered incredible unit cohesion and loyalty. They fought together, lived together, and often died together. Their motto was, "God with us," but their trust was in the man standing next to them in the shield wall. This sense of community was vital because life as a Landsknecht was incredibly harsh. When they weren't fighting, they were on the march, often through hostile territory. They were followed by a massive baggage train called the trosses, which was like a mobile city. It included merchants, craftsmen, cooks, and importantly, the soldiers' wives and children. These women weren't just camp followers, they were an integral part of the regiment. They foraged for food, cooked meals, mended clothes, and cared for the wounded. The trosses was both a support system and a massive logistical challenge. It made the Landsknecht army slow, but it also made them self-sufficient. However, this lifestyle also gave them a notorious reputation. When they were unpaid, on time, which happened a lot, they were known to pay themselves by looting the surrounding countryside. This made them feared by civilians and a headache for the rulers who hired them. Their off-duty behavior was legendary for its gambling, drinking, and brawling. They lived for the moment because they knew that the next battle could easily be their last. This live hard, die fast attitude was a core part of their identity. The ultimate rivals of the Landsknechte were their predecessors, the Swiss pikemen. For decades, these two groups were the premier infantry forces in Europe, and when they met on the battlefield, it was a clash of titans. They had a bitter rivalry, often fueled by professional jealousy and national pride. Battles between the Landsknechte and the Swiss were known for their extreme brutality. They called it schlechten Krieg, or bad war, where no quarter was given. Both sides would refuse to take prisoners, fighting to the last man. It was a contest to prove who was the true master of the pike. While the Swiss held the edge for a long time, the Landsknecht's tactical flexibility, particularly their integration of firearms, eventually helped them gain the upper hand. The golden age of the Landsknechte came to an end in the late 16th century. Warfare was evolving. The rise of larger, state-funded standing armies made mercenary companies less necessary. New tactics and more advanced firearms, like the musket, began to make the dense pike square obsolete. The Landsknechte, with their expensive, individualistic, and sometimes unreliable nature, was slowly phased out in favor of more disciplined, standardized national armies. But their legacy lived on. Their flamboyant fashion influenced European clothing for generations. You can see echoes of their slashed and puffed style in the formal uniforms of the Vatican's Swiss Guard, which ironically were designed during the peak of the Landsknechte era. Militarily, their combined arms tactics laid the groundwork for the pike and shot era that would dominate warfare for the next century. So, the next time you see a picture of a soldier in a ridiculously puffy outfit, remember the lot. They were more than just fashion victims. They were innovators, trailblazers, and some of the toughest soldiers to ever walk a battlefield. They were a walking contradiction, disciplined in formation but chaotic in camp, flamboyant in dress but brutal in combat. They lived by their own rules, fought for anyone who would pay, and left an indelible mark on the history of Europe. They were the original military rock stars. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this dive into military history, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories from the past. Let me know in the comments what historical topic you'd like to see next. Until then, stay curious.